In 1513, a man who had once worked at the heart of power was quietly erased from it. Niccolo Machiavelli had been fired, exiled from Florence, stripped of income, influence, and reputation. He was broke, isolated, politically dead. Each evening after working in the fields, he would do something strange. He would take off his dirty clothes, put on the robes he used to wear as a diplomat, and sit down to write. Later he said that when he did this, he entered the ancient courts of great men. What came out of those nights would eventually be called immoral, misunderstood, and quietly used by almost everyone who understands how power actually works. Because Machiavelli wasn't writing about evil. He was writing about how humans behave when stakes are high. And whether you're building a company, navigating corporate politics, negotiating your salary, or wondering why certain people always seem to rise while others, often smarter, more capable, get stuck, you're about to see something uncomfortable. The game hasn't changed in 500 years, only the language has. The dark psychology of power. What Machiavelli actually meant. 1. The illusion that runs your life. Let's start with a question most people avoid. Why is it so often not the hardest worker who gets promoted? Think about your workplace for a second. There's someone very specific who works fewer hours, speaks less about effort, but somehow gets more credit, more influence, more advancement. Your instinct is to label them political, or fake, or manipulative. But Machiavelli would say something much colder and much more useful. He opens The Prince with a sentence people skim past because it feels obvious. Men judge more with their eyes than with their hands. In plain language, what people see shapes judgment far more than what's actually true. Modern psychology backs this up completely. A Stanford study found that executives who appeared confident during presentations were rated significantly more competent even when their ideas were objectively weaker. Harvard Business Review found that employees who managed their visibility strategically were promoted faster than those who focused only on performance. This isn't because people are stupid. It's because the human brain evolved to make fast social judgments, not fair ones. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Reality can be complex. Perception is immediate, and the system always rewards what it can quickly recognize. 2. The first power principle, signal strength. Machiavelli understood something that still makes people uneasy. Competence alone is not enough. Competence without signal strength is invisible. This isn't about lying. It's about understanding how value is inferred. Let me ground this with a modern example. Two founders, same industry, same timing. Sarah and Marcus both launched SaaS companies within weeks of each other. Both were smart, both had real products. But Marcus understood signaling. Before his product was even finished, he was speaking at industry events, writing clear, confident posts about the future of the space, showing up composed, intentional, unhurried. When he met investors, he spoke slowly. He paused. He didn't rush to convince. Sarah focused on the product. Better UI, better features, better performance. 18 months later, Marcus raised over $3 million at a strong valuation. Sarah, despite having the better product, raised a fraction of that. Why? Because investors don't fund reality. They fund patterns. And calm certainty is one of the strongest patterns the brain associates with competence. This is what Machiavelli meant by self-creation. Not inventing a fake self, but controlling what your nervous system broadcasts. Here's what that looks like in practice. When you speak fast, people feel urgency. Urgency feels like weakness. When you over-explain, people feel insecurity. Insecurity feels like lack of leverage. When you rush to fill silence, people assume you need the outcome. But when you slow down, when you let silence sit, when you state instead of justify, you trigger a powerful assumption. This person has options. And in every negotiation, money, status, opportunity, the person who appears to have options sets the price.
3. The ambiguity advantage. Machiavelli noticed something else that most people misunderstand. Power doesn't always come from being loud or obvious. Often, it comes from being slightly unclear. He described two figures, the star and the dandy, people who couldn't be easily categorized. Psychology explains why this works. When information is incomplete, the brain fills in the gaps, usually with desire, optimism, or fantasy. That's not manipulation, that's projection. This is why premium brands never explain themselves too much, why Apple shows lifestyle before specifications, why ambiguity increases perceived value. Now apply this to your own life. Every time you over-explain why you need the raise, why the project took longer, why you're qualified, you remove mystery, and mystery is where leverage lives. Compare these two responses. One person says, I really need this job. I've been applying for months. I have loans. I'm passionate. I'll work harder than anyone. Another says, I've been selective about where I invest my time. Your team is working on something interesting. I've delivered specific outcomes before. I'm curious how you see this role evolving. Same honesty, very different signal. The first leaks desperation. The second suggests choice. And people consistently choose what they fear losing. Machiavelli wasn't advocating deception. He was warning against uncontrolled self-disclosure. In 2025, we call this personal branding. In 1513, he called it something simpler, strategic silence in a world addicted to noise. Mystery isn't manipulation. Mystery is march. 4. The competence paradox. There's a quiet trap that catches almost everyone who's ambitious. You grow up believing the formula is simple. Work hard, be reliable, get rewarded. So you stay late, you fix problems no one else wants to touch, you become the person everyone depends on. And then something strange happens. Your work starts getting passed around without your name on it. Decisions get made in meetings you weren't invited to. Your effort becomes normal, expected, invisible. Machiavelli noticed this centuries ago, and he didn't sugarcoat it. People are busy managing how they look. They rarely stop to notice what you carry. Here's the paradox most people never see coming. The better you are at quietly executing, the easier it is for others to stand on your shoulders. Not because they're evil, because attention follows visibility, not effort. Let me make this very human. Think about two people you've worked with. One keeps their head down, solves problems, delivers, rarely speaks up. The other documents everything, shares updates, talks about direction. Same intelligence, different outcomes. Over time, one becomes dependable. The other becomes leadership material. It feels unfair because it is. But here's the reframe that changes everything. Visibility isn't ego, it's oxygen. Without it, even great work suffocates. This doesn't mean turning into a show-off. It means letting the right people see the shape of your contribution. If you do 10 hours of work and no one understands its impact, you didn't fail morally, but you did fail strategically.
5. The cruelty of kindness. This is where Machiavelli makes people uncomfortable. He asked a question that still makes us squirm. Is it better to be loved or feared? His answer wasn't about cruelty, it was about predictability. Here's the modern version. People don't actually want a leader who's endlessly nice. They want a leader who's clear. Think about the managers, clients, or partners who stressed you out the most. They weren't usually the strict ones. They were the unclear ones. The ones who said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. Who avoided hard conversations. Who smiled while silently building resentment. Kindness without clarity feels good in the moment, but it creates anxiety underneath.
Machiavelli understood something psychology now confirms. Inconsistency feels threatening. Boundaries feel safe. Being nice by avoiding discomfort often leads to more pain later. We've all seen this play out. A new manager wants to be liked. They let deadlines slide. They avoid giving feedback. They hope problems will resolve themselves. Months later, everything explodes. Not because they were weak, but because they were unclear. Here's the distinction most people miss. Cruelty is unnecessary. Clarity is non-negotiable. Clear expectations, clear feedback, clear consequences. That's not harsh, that's humane. One honest conversation now is kinder than 6 months of silent tension followed by a sudden ending. This applies everywhere. Salary conversations, client boundaries, ending partnerships, letting go of people or projects that aren't working. Avoiding discomfort doesn't make you kind, it just postpones.
6. The fortune principle. Machiavelli ends The Prince with an idea most people skip past. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unsettling. He says that life, fortune, luck, opportunity controls about half of what happens to us. The other half? That's on us. Here's the uncomfortable part. Waiting for certainty feels responsible, but it's often the most expensive choice you can make. Think about how many things you delayed because you wanted to feel ready. The raise you didn't ask for, the role you didn't apply to, the project you postponed, the conversation you avoided. You weren't lazy, you were cautious. But caution has a hidden cost. In business, in careers, in investing, the best opportunities don't show up when you feel prepared. They show up when things are unstable, when others hesitate. That's not recklessness, that's timing. Look at major moments in history. During downturns, uncertainty, disruption, some people freeze, others move. Not blindly, but decisively. Here's the shift that matters. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start acting when the downside is survivable. Ask yourself 3 simple questions. What's the worst realistic outcome here? Can I recover from it? What does waiting cost me? Most of the time, the fear is louder than the risk. Machiavelli wasn't saying be reckless. He was saying fortune doesn't reward perfection. It rewards movement. You don't need 100% certainty. You need enough information to move without self-destruction. Some people wait their whole lives for confidence. Others build confidence by acting first. That's the difference. If there's one thread running through all of this, it's simple. Power, money, and opportunity don't go to the most virtuous, the most exhausted, or the most careful. They go to the people who understand how humans actually decide. And once you see that clearly, you stop taking outcomes personally and start playing the game with open eyes. 7. The authenticity trap. Before we go any further, we need to slow down and address something honestly. Because I know what some of you are thinking right now. This all sounds calculated. I just want to be authentic. I don't want to play games. That instinct makes sense. It's a good instinct. But here's a question most people never stop to ask. Which version of you are you talking about? Because you're not one fixed thing. There's a version of you at home, half asleep, scrolling your phone late at night. There's a version of you with close friends, venting without filters. There's a version of you at work, choosing words carefully. There's a version of you in high-stakes moments, trying to stay calm. All of those are real. So which one is the authentic you? Research from business psychology shows something interesting. People who tried to bring every part of themselves into professional settings were often seen as confusing, unreliable, or lacking judgment, not because they were bad people, but because context matters. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Adjusting how you show up isn't being fake, it's being socially fluent. You already do this without thinking. You don't talk to your boss the way you talk to your best friend. You don't talk to your grandmother the way you talk to your group chat. That's not manipulation, that's awareness. Authenticity doesn't mean unfiltered access. It means alignment, sharing the right parts of yourself in the right place at the right time. Oversharing isn't honesty.
Sometimes it's just poor timing.
8. The virtue signal illusion. This next part can be uncomfortable, but it's important. Machiavelli wrote that promises exist within context, and when the context changes, behavior often follows. That sounds cold until you look around. You've seen this in real life. A company talks about being a family until layoffs happen. A manager promises growth until budgets tighten. A partnership feels solid until incentives shift. This isn't always malicious, it's structural. Systems respond to pressure, not principles. The mistake most people make is taking symbolic language at face value. Value statements, big words, emotional messaging. Those things matter, but only when reinforced by action. Here's the practical lesson, stripped of drama. Trust what people do consistently, not what they say beautifully. That doesn't mean assume bad intent. It means stay grounded in reality. Get clarity in writing. Watch incentives. Notice patterns over time. Loyalty isn't permanent. It's continuously renegotiated by both sides. That doesn't make you cynical. It makes you prepared. Be warm with people. Be clear-eyed with systems. That balance protects you.
9. The shadow integration. Everything you heard so far can be used in two very different ways. One way builds something real while protecting you from being naive. The other builds image without substance and eventually collapses. This is where Machiavelli is often misunderstood. He wasn't praising empty manipulation, he was warning that perception without substance is unstable. We've all seen this play out. People who mastered appearances but delivered nothing eventually fell apart. People who combined skill and strategy lasted. The takeaway is simple but demanding. Signals matter. Substance matters more, and the two have to match. If you build real value but hide it, you'll be overlooked. If you amplify yourself without real value, you'll be exposed. The mature path is integration. Build skills, make them visible, understand the environment so you're not blindsided. Not to dominate others, but to stop being dominated by systems you didn't design.
10. The call to integration. So where does this leave you? You now understand something many people sense but never articulate. The world runs on perception and performance. Ignoring either comes with consequences. But here's the good news. Once you see the game, you don't have to become bitter or manipulative. You can play it consciously. Here's a simple way to start. This week, ask yourself, is my work visible to the people who decide outcomes? In one conversation, slow down. Say less. Let silence work. Identify one decision you've been delaying, not because it's wrong, but because it's uncomfortable. This month, look at your relationships. Are they reciprocal? Start building optionality, skills, savings, connections. Keep a record of your wins, not for ego, for clarity. And remember this, Machiavelli wrote from exile, from loss, from having already paid the price of misunderstanding power. His insight wasn't be ruthless. It was this: the rules exist whether you like them or not. Understanding them gives you choice. You can be strategic without being cruel, aware without being cynical, competent without being invisible. Power itself is neutral. Used unconsciously, it harms. Used deliberately, it builds. The question isn't whether these dynamics affect you. They already do. The question is what you'll create now that you can finally see them. Fade to black. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. Machiavelli. If this shifted how you see your career, your money, or your decisions, don't let it stop here. Apply one idea this week, then come back and tell us what changed. This is neural capital. We don't teach shortcuts, we teach clarity. See you next time.